Welcome to Soothing Stories. Tonight, settle in and let the world outside grow quiet. This is a story about the Han Dynasty, China's golden age. There is nothing you need to do now but listen and breathe. Let the words carry you gently into rest. The evening descends upon the city of Chang'an like a silk curtain drawn slowly across the sky. The last rays of the setting sun catch the glazed tiles of the imperial palace, turning them to molten gold against the deepening blue of twilight. Lanterns are being lit along the broad avenues. One by one, they bloom like earthbound stars, their warm amber glow pushing gently against the gathering dusk. The great capital of the Han Dynasty settles into its evening rhythms, and the sounds of the day begin to soften, the clatter of ox carts fading, the calls of merchants growing quiet, the city exhaling after another day of life in the heart of the world's most advanced civilization. This is Chang'an in the year 100 BCE, during the reign of Emperor Wu, and it is a city unlike any other on Earth. More than 250,000 people live within its walls, scholars and soldiers, merchants and monks, artisans and administrators, all bound together in the elaborate tapestry of Han society. The walls themselves stretch for miles in every direction, enclosing a planned grid of streets and districts, marketplaces and residences, temples and government offices. It is a city built with intention, every avenue aligned with the cardinal directions, every district assigned its purpose, the whole arrangement reflecting the Han belief that human society should mirror the harmony of heaven. Walk with me now through these streets as the evening deepens. The paving stones beneath our feet are worn smooth by generations of traffic, and they hold the warmth of the day even as the air begins to cool. To our left, behind a wall of plastered brick, we can hear the murmur of a family gathering for their evening meal, the soft percussion of chopsticks against ceramic bowls, the gentle conversation of parents and children, the occasional bright note of a child's laughter quickly hushed by an elder. The scent of steaming millet and stewed vegetables drifts over the wall, mingling with the faint sweetness of burning incense from a household shrine. Ahead of us, the avenue opens into one of Chang'an's great marketplaces. By day, this square would be a chaos of commerce, silk merchants unfurling bolts of fabric in jewel-bright colors, spice sellers presiding over pyramids of ground cinnamon and star anise, jade carvers displaying their miniature masterpieces on beds of dark cloth. But now, in the gathering dusk, the market is closing. The last few merchants are packing their wares into wooden chests, their apprentices sweeping the stone flags clean with brooms of bound straw. A water seller makes his final round, his wooden bucket swaying on the pole across his shoulders, the water catching the lantern light in brief golden flashes. The Han Dynasty. For more than 400 years, from 206 BCE to 220 CE, this dynasty ruled over a civilization of extraordinary sophistication and reach. It was a period so formative, so culturally defining, that to this day the majority ethnic group of China calls itself the Han people, and the Chinese writing system is known as Han characters. This was not merely a political entity, it was the crucible in which Chinese civilization as we know it was forged. The philosophies, the technologies, the art forms, the social structures, So much of what we think of as essentially Chinese took its lasting shape during these for remarkable centuries. But let us not hurry through these centuries. Let us instead slow our pace and linger in the details, the textures, the quiet moments of daily life that made up the lived experience of the Han world. For history is not only the rise and fall of emperors, it is also the feel of silk beneath a weaver's fingers, the sound of rain on a thatched roof, the scent of ink freshly ground on a scholar's stone. The story begins, as so many stories of dynastic change do, in chaos. The Qin dynasty, which had unified China for the first time under the iron rule of its first emperor, collapsed into civil war after barely 15 years. The Qin had built the Great Wall, standardized weights and measures, and imposed a brutal uniformity upon the land, but their harshness proved to be their undoing. When the first emperor died and his weak successor took the throne, the empire shattered like an overwound spring. From the wreckage emerged two rival claimants to power. One was Song Yu, a nobleman and warrior of legendary strength, descended from the aristocracy of the old state of Chu. The other was Liu Bang, a man of far humbler origins, a village headman, a minor official, a man who by his own admission preferred drinking and conversation to studying the classics. The war between them raged for years across the scarred landscape of China, and when the dust finally settled, it was Liu Bang, the commoner, the underdog, who stood victorious. He founded the Han Dynasty and took the throne as Emperor Gaozu, the High Ancestor. Imagine that moment. A man born into a family of farmers, raised in a small village in the flat river country of eastern China, now seated upon the dragon throne in a hastily constructed palace. The year is 202 BCE, and everything is uncertain. The land is exhausted from decades of war, fields lie fallow, villages stand empty, the population has been halved by famine and fighting. The treasury is so depleted that the new emperor cannot even find 4 horses of matching color to pull his imperial chariot. The government barely functions. The bureaucracy of the Qin has scattered, and the old feudal lords are watching from their estates, calculating their chances. But Liu Bang was a pragmatist, and he surrounded himself with brilliant advisors. Where the Qin had ruled through fear and punishment, the early Han emperors chose a gentler path. They reduced taxes, relaxed the harshest laws, and gave the people space to recover. The philosophy that guided this approach was Huanglao Taoism, a school of thought that emphasized Wu Wei, the art of governing through minimal interference, of allowing natural processes to unfold without forcing them. Let the people rest. Let the fields recover. Let commerce find its own rhythms. The state would provide the framework of order, but within that framework, life would be left to breathe. And breathe it did. Over the decades that followed, the population grew, the harvests improved, the granaries filled. The marketplaces bustled again with trade. Roads were repaired, canals were dredged, and the slow pulse of commerce began to flow through the arteries of the empire once more. The early Han period was a time of quiet recovery, of wounds healing, of a civilization gathering its strength for the explosion of creativity and expansion that was to come. Picture a farmstead in the Wei River Valley, perhaps 50 years after the founding of the dynasty. The morning mist clings to the rice paddies in thin veils of white, and the terraced fields step down the hillside like a giant staircase, each level a mirror of still water reflecting the pale sky. A farmer emerges from his house, a structure of rammed earth walls and thatched roof, modest but sturdy, built to last generations. He pauses at the threshold and breathes in the cool air, tasting the dampness, reading the sky for signs of the day's weather. His tools are arranged with care beneath the eaves: an iron-tip plough, a sickle with a wooden handle worn smooth by years of use, a seed drill that allows him to plant in neat rows rather than scattering seed by hand. This seed drill is a Han invention, one of dozens of agricultural innovations that have transformed farming in this era. The iron plough is another, its moldboard curved to turn the soil efficiently, its blade sharp enough to cut through the heavy clay of the river bottoms. With these tools, a single family can cultivate more land than their grandparents could have imagined. The farmer walks down through his fields, checking the water levels in each terrace, adjusting the small sluice gates that control the flow from one level to the next. The engineering of these irrigation systems is precise and elegant. Gravity does most of the work, but human ingenuity has shaped the landscape to make the most of every drop of water. In the lowest paddies, he can see the green shoots of young rice pushing up through the shallow water, each plant straight and evenly spaced, promising a good harvest if the rains continue to fall as they should. Beyond his fields, the landscape stretches away into the distance, a patchwork of cultivated land and woodland, dotted with the smoke of other farmsteads, crossed by paths and cart tracks that lead eventually to the nearest market town. Life here moves to the rhythm of the seasons, planting and harvest, wet and dry, the slow wheel of the agricultural year turning as it has turned for centuries, but now with greater security, greater productivity, greater confidence in the future. The farmer's grandfather remembers the wars, remembers the hunger, remembers burying seed grain so the soldiers wouldn't take it. His grandson knows only peace. The granaries are full, the roads are safe, the tax collectors come once a year and take no more than is fair. This is what a golden age feels like from inside, not dramatic, not exciting, but simply safe. Simply good. The market town lies an hour's walk from the farmstead, at the junction of two roads and a small river. It is a modest place, perhaps 2,000 inhabitants, but it serves as the economic heart of the surrounding countryside. Every 5 days, the market opens, and farmers from the surrounding villages bring their surplus to trade. Rice, millet, wheat, vegetables, eggs, chickens, pigs, bamboo shoots, wild herbs gathered from the hillsides, fish caught in the river, firewood bundled and dried. The market is a living catalogue of the region's productivity. The market master, a low-ranking government official responsible for fair trading, has already hung the flag that signals the market is open. He checks the weights and measures that merchants must use, all standardized to the imperial specification. The Han government takes trade seriously. It understands that commerce is the lifeblood of prosperity, that fair markets make for stable communities, that a farmer who can sell his surplus at a fair price will produce more next year. The grand theories of empire come down to this: a set of standardized weights in a market town, ensuring that a kati of rice is the same weight here as in Chang'an. Let us move now from the world of the farmer and the merchant to the world of the scholar. For if there is one thing that defines the Han Dynasty above all else, it is the elevation of learning to the highest place in society. The Han created something unprecedented in the ancient world, a government staffed not by hereditary nobles or military strongmen, but by educated men selected through examination. This was the birth of the Chinese civil service, an institution that would endure for over 2,000 years and influence governments across the globe. In a quiet courtyard in Chang'an, a young man sits at his writing desk in the thin light of early morning. Before him lies a sheet of silk. Paper exists already in this era, but silk is still preferred for important documents. His ink stick rests in its lacquered tray beside a small pool of water, and his brush, its tip of rabbit hair set in a bamboo handle, waits in its rest. He is preparing for the imperial examination, the gateway through which all aspiring officials must pass. The text before him is the Analects of Confucius, and he reads it not merely to memorize but to understand, to internalize its teachings about duty, virtue, propriety, and the proper ordering of human relationships. The examination system of the Han is still in its early form. It will grow more elaborate over the centuries to come, but already it represents a revolutionary idea. That merit, not birth, should determine who governs. That wisdom, not wealth, should confer authority. That the state should actively seek out talented men from all levels of society and train them in the arts of administration. Emperor Wu, the great expansionist ruler who sits upon the throne during this young scholar's lifetime, has established a national academy, the Taixue, where promising students from across the empire come to study under the finest teachers of the age. The curriculum is vast. The 5 classics form its core: the Book of Changes, the Book of Documents, the Book of Songs, the Book of Rites, and the Spring and Autumn Annals. But beyond these canonical texts, a scholar is expected to know history, mathematics, astronomy, music, calligraphy, and the art of persuasive writing. He must be able to compose poetry that moves the heart, craft arguments that convince the mind, and write administrative documents that are models of clarity and precision. The ideal is the junzi, the cultivated gentleman whose learning and virtue qualify him to serve both his ruler and his people. Our young scholar practices his calligraphy now, each stroke of the brush a meditation in itself. The character he draws is Ren, benevolence, the highest Confucian virtue. The brush touches the silk with the lightness of a falling leaf, pauses, draws downward with controlled pressure, lifts again. Each character is both meaning and art, communication and beauty fused into a single act. The morning light strengthens as he works, and the sounds of the waking city begin to filter into his courtyard, the cry of a street vendor, the clop of hooves on stone, the distant chime of a temple bell marking the hour. He will study for years before he is ready for the examination. Many students begin their formal education at age 6 or 7, learning to read and write the thousands of characters needed for basic literacy. By their teenage years, those with talent and family support are reading the classics under the guidance of a private tutor. By their 20s, the most promising are making the long journey to Chang'an to sit for the imperial examination. The competition is fierce, hundreds apply for every position. But for those who succeed, the reward is extraordinary, a career in the imperial bureaucracy, with its guaranteed salary, its social prestige, and its opportunity to shape the governance of the empire. The young scholar sets down his brush and stands, stretching his back after hours of concentrated work. He walks to the edge of his courtyard and looks up at the sky, a square of blue framed by the grey walls of his modest lodging. A single cloud drifts across it, white against blue, slow as thought itself. He thinks of his family back in their provincial town, his father who scraped together the money for his tutor, his mother who sold her best silk dress to buy him traveling clothes for the journey to the capital. He will not fail them. He will study harder, longer, better than anyone else. He will pass the examination and bring honor to his family's name. But the Han Dynasty was not only a civilization of scholars and farmers. It was also an empire of extraordinary technological innovation, a place where practical ingenuity flourished alongside philosophical contemplation. The list of inventions and discoveries attributed to this period is staggering in its breadth. Paper, the magnetic compass, the seismograph, the water wheel, the wheelbarrow, chain pumps for irrigation, blast furnaces for producing cast iron, ship rudders, multi-story buildings, advanced textile looms, crossbow triggers of extraordinary mechanical precision. The list extends on and on, each innovation building upon those that came before, each one a testament to the inventive genius of Han craftsmen and thinkers. Consider the seismograph, or more precisely, the earthquake detector, invented by Zhongheng in 132 CE. Imagine it standing in a hall of the Imperial Observatory, a large bronze vessel, nearly 2 meters tall, its surface decorated with mountains and tortoises and birds in raised relief. Around its circumference, 8 bronze dragons face outward in the 8 cardinal directions, each holding a bronze ball in its jaws. Below each dragon sits a bronze toad with its mouth open wide, ready to receive. Inside the vessel, a mechanism of extraordinary delicacy, a pendulum connected to a system of levers. When the earth trembles, even hundreds of miles away, the pendulum swings, triggering one of the dragons to release its ball into the waiting mouth of the toad below. The direction the ball falls tells the court which direction to send relief. Zhongheng was himself a remarkable figure, astronomer, mathematician, poet, inventor, and painter. He served as the court astronomer and was responsible for maintaining the imperial calendar and predicting eclipses. He calculated pi to a degree of accuracy not matched in the West for centuries. He wrote poetry of delicate beauty about the natural world. And he built mechanical devices of astonishing ingenuity, including a water-powered armillary sphere that rotated in real time to show the positions of the stars, and a device called a south-pointing chariot that used a differential gear to always indicate south regardless of the direction of travel. In Zhongheng, we see the Han ideal made flesh, the polymathic genius whose curiosity ranged freely across all fields of knowledge, unbound by the specialization that would later narrow the intellectual horizons of other civilizations. Or consider paper, perhaps the single most consequential invention in human history before the printing press. Cai Lun, a court eunuch, is traditionally credited with perfecting the process in 105 CE, though archaeological evidence suggests that paper-making was practiced somewhat earlier. He took tree bark, hemp, old rags, and fishing nets, soaked them in water, pounded them into a pulp, spread the slurry thinly over a woven screen, and pressed out the water. When the thin sheet dried, it was paper, light, cheap, and easy to produce in quantity. Before this, writing required bamboo strips or expensive silk. Paper democratized knowledge, making books affordable and administration efficient. It would transform not only China but eventually the entire world. Imagine the moment when the first sheet of paper dried on its screen, how light it must have seemed compared to the heavy bamboo strips that scholars had labored under for centuries. Imagine the first official report written on paper instead of carved on wood, how quickly it could be produced, how easily transported, how efficiently filed. The bureaucratic implications alone were revolutionary. A government that runs on paper can process more information, maintain more detailed records, communicate more quickly across vast distances than one that relies on bamboo or silk. Paper made the hand bureaucracy faster, more responsive, more capable, and in doing so, it made the empire itself more coherent, more unified, more effectively governed. The evening deepens now over Chang'an, and we find ourselves drawn toward the imperial palace, that vast complex at the northern end of the city, its walls higher and thicker than those that surround the city itself, its gate towers rising against the stars like geometric mountains. Within those walls lies a world unto itself, gardens and pavilions, audience halls and private chambers, administrative offices and treasure houses, all arranged according to the principles of cosmic harmony, all oriented to reflect the emperor's role as the intermediary between heaven and earth. The palace of the Han emperors is not a single building but a constellation of structures spread across an enormous compound. The largest of these, the Weiyang Palace, covers an area of nearly 5 square kilometers, larger than the later Forbidden City in Beijing, larger than the Palace of Versailles. Its main audience hall, where the emperor receives his ministers and foreign ambassadors, is raised on a platform of pounded earth faced with stone, its roof supported by massive lacquered columns painted in red and gold, its floor tiled in polished terracotta. Silk hangings in imperial yellow, the color reserved for the Son of Heaven alone, drape from the ceiling beams, stirring gently in the air currents created by bronze incense burners shaped like sacred mountains. The incense burners themselves are masterworks of bronze casting, intricate mountain landscapes with peaks and valleys, waterfalls and forests, mythical creatures climbing the slopes and clouds wreathing the summits. Incense smoke rises through tiny holes in the peaks, creating the illusion of mist around a mountain. These objects are called Boshanlu hill censers, and they represent the mythical islands of the immortals, where the blessed dead live in eternal youth. The emperor burns incense in these censers not merely for fragrance but as a ritual act, sending perfumed smoke upward to heaven, maintaining the connection between the earthly and the divine. But let us not linger in the formal spaces of power. Let us instead walk through the quieter regions of the palace, the gardens where the emperor takes his leisure, where ponds of clear water reflect the moon, where carefully pruned trees create frames for views of distant hills. Here the paths wind between beds of peonies and chrysanthemums, past pavilions built for viewing the sunrise or listening to the rain. Cranes stalk the shallow margins of the ponds, their white plumage ghostly in the moonlight, and somewhere in the darkness a zither is playing, its notes falling like drops of water into a still pool, each one sending ripples of sound outward into the night. The music is coming from the quarters of the imperial women, the empress, the consorts, the ladies-in-waiting who form the female hierarchy of the palace. The zither player is practicing a piece called High Mountains and Flowing Water, one of the oldest melodies in the Chinese musical tradition. The notes rise and fall with the deliberate grace of a crane in flight, sometimes rushing forward like a mountain stream over stones, sometimes pausing in long sustained tones that seem to hold the night suspended. In the Han conception of music, each note corresponds to an element, a direction, a season. To play well is to bring these forces into harmony, to create a small pocket of cosmic order through the arrangement of sound. Music held a central place in Han civilization. Confucius himself had taught that music and ritual were the twin pillars of a well-ordered society, that the proper performance of music could harmonize the emotions, align the individual with the cosmic order, and even influence the behavior of the natural world. The Han court maintained an elaborate bureau of music, the UFU, which collected folk songs from across the empire, composed new pieces for court ceremonies, and maintained a vast ensemble of musicians and dancers. The instruments ranged from the delicate silk string cheen to great bronze bells, from bamboo flutes to stone chimes, from drums of stretched leather to ocarinas of baked clay. The UFU's collection of folk songs preserves a remarkable window into the emotional life of ordinary Han people. Love songs and laments, work songs and drinking songs, songs of soldiers longing for home and wives waiting for husbands who may never return, these anonymous compositions speak across 2,000 years with undiminished power. One famous UFU poem tells of a woman waiting by the roadside for her husband's return from military service in the far north. She waits through spring and summer and autumn, watching the road, until winter comes and still he does not appear. The poem ends without resolution, we never learn whether he returns or not. The waiting itself is the poem's subject, the uncertainty its emotional core. In its spare, unsentimental beauty, it could have been written yesterday. The night continues to deepen, and the palace grows quiet. In his private chambers, the emperor has retired, but not to sleep, not yet. He sits with his closest advisor, reviewing reports from the western frontiers. The maps spread before them show the vast territories beyond the empire's borders, the deserts and steppes of Central Asia, the distant kingdoms glimpsed only through the reports of envoys and merchants. For the Han dynasty is not content merely to rule China proper. Under Emperor Wu, the empire has pushed its boundaries outward in every direction, south into the jungles of Vietnam, northeast into the Korean peninsula, and most dramatically of all, westward along the corridor that will one day be called the Silk Road. The Silk Road. Even the name carries a kind of magic, a thread of commerce and culture stretching 5,000 miles from Chang'an to the shores of the Mediterranean, linking the Han Empire to the Kushan kingdoms of India, the Parthian Empire of Persia, and ultimately to Rome itself. The road is not a single track but a network of routes, some threading through mountain passes at dizzying heights, others skirting the edges of merciless deserts, still others following river valleys through green oases where weary travelers could rest and resupply. The man who opened this road was Zhongqian, an imperial envoy dispatched by Emperor Wu in 138 BCE on what seemed an impossible mission, to travel westward beyond the known world and forge an alliance with the Yuezhi people against the Xiongnu nomads who threatened China's northern border. Zhongqian's journey lasted 13 years. He was captured by the Xiongnu and held prisoner for a decade. He escaped, continued westward, reached the kingdoms of Fergana and Bactria in what is now Uzbekistan and Afghanistan, and eventually returned to Chang'an with extraordinary reports of lands, peoples, and products that no Chinese had ever seen before. He spoke of horses that sweated blood, the famous Fergana horses, tall and powerful, far superior to the small steppe ponies the Chinese knew. He described grapes and alfalfa, glass and wool, gold coin stamped with the faces of foreign kings. He told of great cities in the western lands where merchants from a dozen nations mingled in bazaars that sold goods from the ends of the earth. His reports electrified the court. Emperor Wu immediately dispatched further envoys and, when diplomacy failed, armies. The path was opened, and trade began to flow. Picture a caravan setting out from Chang'an in the grey light before dawn. Camels loaded with bales of silk, China's most precious export, a fabric so fine and light that foreigners believed it must be woven from spider webs or the petals of flowers. The silk is accompanied by iron tools, lacquerware, bronze mirrors, and bundles of cinnamon bark. The caravan master checks his animals one final time, adjusts a load that has shifted, speaks a quiet word to his lead camel. Then, with a command that echoes off the city walls, the procession moves forward, out through the western gate, along the road that leads into the corridor between the mountains and the desert, toward the unknown lands beyond. The journey will take months. Some merchants will travel only a portion of the route, selling their goods at oasis towns and turning back. Others, the boldest, will push onward for a year or more, through the Taklamakan desert where the sand shifts like a living thing and the wind can bury a caravan overnight, over the Pamir Mountains where the air is so thin that men and animals gasp for breath, down into the green valleys of Fergana where the blood-sweating horses graze in meadows watered by snowmelt streams. The desert crossing is the most dangerous portion of the journey. The Taklamakan, its name means, in the Yugur language, you go in and you don't come out. The caravan follows the oases that dot its southern and northern edges, never venturing into the interior where the sand seas roll in waves hundreds of feet high and no water can be found for weeks of travel. Even on the oasis routes, the distances between water sources are measured in days, and a sandstorm can obliterate the track in hours. The caravan master knows these dangers intimately. He has walked this road a dozen times, and he has buried friends in the sand. He carries extra water skins, watches the sky for the telltale yellow haze that precedes a storm, and prays to whatever gods he believes in that the wells ahead will not have run dry. At night in the desert, the caravan makes camp in the lee of whatever shelter can be found, a rock outcrop, a dried riverbed, the ruins of a way station from some earlier era. The camels are hobbled and allowed to browse on the sparse desert scrub. A small fire is lit, not for warmth in this season, but for the comfort of its light against the enormous darkness of the desert night. The merchants gather close, sharing dried meat and flatbread and the strong brick tea that sustains them on the road. Their conversations are a blend of languages, Chinese, Sogdian, perhaps some Tokharian or early Turkic. Trade creates its own lingua franca, a practical pidgin of numbers and qualities and the names of goods. Above them, the desert sky is a cathedral of stars. This far from any city, any moisture, any obstruction, the sky reveals depths within depths, stars behind stars, the great band of the Milky Way so bright it casts faint shadows on the sand. The caravan master can read this sky as easily as a scholar reads a book. He knows which stars mark north, which constellations indicate the season, which rising star tells him dawn is near. His navigation by the stars has brought him safely across this desert many times, and he trusts their guidance more than any map drawn on silk. What came back along the Silk Road was equally remarkable. From the west came glass, a substance the Chinese had not yet learned to produce in quantity. From India came Buddhism, a philosophy that would transform Chinese civilization over the coming centuries. From Persia came new musical instruments, new dances, new flavors. From Rome came gold, coral, amber, and an insatiable appetite for Chinese silk. The Roman naturalist Pliny complained that Rome's love of silk was draining the empire of its gold, that the vanity of Roman women was funding a civilization on the other side of the world. But the Silk Road carried more than goods. It carried ideas, techniques, religions, diseases, artistic styles, and stories. It was along this road that Chinese paper-making would eventually reach the Islamic world and then Europe. It was along this road that Buddhism traveled eastward into China, Korea, and Japan. It was a highway of cultural exchange unmatched until the modern age, and it was the Han Dynasty that created it, maintained it, and profited most richly from it. Let us rest for a moment at one of the oasis towns along the route, Dunhuang, perhaps, at the edge of the Taklamakan Desert, where the road splits into northern and southern branches to skirt that terrible expanse of sand. Dunhuang is a town of merchants and monks, of camel drivers and craftsmen, where a dozen languages can be heard in the marketplace and a dozen faiths worship side by side. The inns are full tonight. A westbound caravan arrived this afternoon, and the merchants are celebrating the completion of the first and most dangerous leg of their journey with wine from earthenware jars and songs from home. The oasis itself is a miracle of persistence, a spring that rises from deep underground, feeding a small lake surrounded by willows and tamarisk trees. Date palms grow here, and melons, and the small hard apricots of the desert. The water is sweet and cold, drawn up from some aquifer fed by the distant mountains whose snowy peaks are visible on clear days to the south. Caravans that have crossed days of waterless desert arrive at Dunhuang like ships reaching harbor after a storm, the animals smelling the water from miles away and quickening their pace without being urged. In the cliffs outside town, Buddhist monks are beginning to carve the first of what will eventually become hundreds of cave temples, the Mogaro Caves, decorated with paintings and sculptures that will preserve the art of a dozen dynasties for future generations. But that lies in the future. Tonight, the cliffs are dark and silent under the stars, and the only sound is the wind moving through the desert scrub and the faint music from the town below. The stars above Dunhuang are extraordinary, this far from the moisture of the coast, this far from any large city's glow of lanterns. The sky is a river of light. The Milky Way arches from horizon to horizon, so dense with stars that it seems like a luminous cloud. The Han astronomers knew this sky intimately. They had catalogued over 1,000 stars, organized them into constellations, though different from the Western ones, and tracked the movements of the planets with precision that would not be matched in Europe for centuries. Han astronomers used instruments of remarkable sophistication, armillary spheres that modeled the apparent movement of celestial bodies, water-powered celestial globes that rotated in real time to show the current positions of the stars, sighting tubes for precise observation. They recorded solar eclipses, lunar eclipses, comets, novae, and sunspots. Their records of sunspot observations are the oldest in the world. They developed a calendar of extraordinary accuracy, with its 12 lunar months adjusted by intercalary months to keep pace with the solar year, its system of 24 seasonal markers dividing the year into periods that guided the agricultural cycle with remarkable precision. The astronomer sits in his observatory tower as the night deepens, his eye to the sighting tube, tracking the slow progress of Jupiter across the background stars. His assistant records each observation on a bamboo slip with quick, precise strokes of the brush. Below them, the city sleeps, but up here, the work of understanding heaven continues through the long watches of the night. Each observation is a data point in a pattern that stretches across centuries, each measurement a contribution to the great project of predicting the motions of the celestial bodies, a project that the Han astronomers pursued with a patience and precision that borders on the sublime. The observatory is a quiet place at this hour, only the astronomer, his assistant, and the slow turning of the stars. Occasionally a night bird calls from somewhere below, and occasionally the wind shifts and brings with it the faint scent of night-blooming jasmine from the palace gardens. But mostly there is silence, the deep, productive silence of concentrated work. The astronomer adjusts his instrument by a fraction of a degree, notes the position of a star, compares it to the records from previous years. The discrepancy is tiny, less than the width of a grain of rice held at arm's length, but it is real, and it must be accounted for. In such tiny measurements, repeated over centuries, lies the path to understanding the mechanics of heaven. Let us move forward in time now, past the peak of Han power under Emperor Wu, into the quieter centuries that followed. The dynasty's history is divided into two halves, the Western Han, with its capital at Chang'an, lasting from 206 BCE to 9 CE, and the Eastern Han, with its capital at Luoyang, lasting from 25 to 220 CE. Between them lies a brief interruption, the reign of Wang Mang, a court official who seized the throne and attempted radical reforms that ultimately failed, plunging the empire back into civil war until the Han Restoration. Wang Mang is one of history's most fascinating failures, a man of genuine idealism who attempted to redistribute land from the wealthy to the poor, to regulate prices, to abolish slavery, and to restore what he saw as the ancient virtues of the early Zhou dynasty. His reforms were too radical, too sudden, too poorly implemented. The great landowners resisted, the bureaucracy couldn't cope with the changes, and a series of natural disasters, floods on the Yellow River that displaced millions, destroyed whatever remaining support he had. His 15-year reign ended in blood and chaos, and the restored Han dynasty that followed learned a lesson about the limits of reform, that even well-intentioned change, if pushed too far too fast, can bring down an empire. The eastern Han capital of Luoyang is a different city from Chang'an, smaller, perhaps, but no less cultured. It sits in the fertile plain between the Yellow River and the Luo River, surrounded by hills that shelter it from the northern winds. The city's layout echoes that of its predecessor, the same grid of streets, the same orientation to the cardinal directions, but the architecture has grown more refined, the gardens more elaborate, the cultural life more sophisticated. This is the period that produces some of China's greatest literary and artistic achievements, the poetry of the UFO ballads reaching new heights of emotional depth, the historical writing of Ban Jiyu completing the definitive history of the Western Han, the scientific works of Zhonghang expanding human understanding of the natural world. Imagine a spring morning in Luoyang. The plum trees are in bloom along the boulevards, clouds of white and pink blossoms trembling in the gentle breeze, their petals drifting down like fragrant snow onto the paving stones below. A scholar walks beneath them on his way to the Imperial Library, the largest repository of knowledge in the ancient world. He carries under his arm a new manuscript, a treatise on hydraulic engineering that he hopes will earn him a position in the government. His footsteps are unhurried, his face turned upward to catch the occasional petal on his cheek, his mind already composing the poem he will write this evening about the transience of spring blossoms and the endurance of human knowledge. The library of Luoyang contains tens of thousands of scrolls, texts on philosophy, history, poetry, medicine, astronomy, mathematics, agriculture, military strategy, divination, and natural history. Scholars come from across the empire to consult its holdings, to copy rare texts, to debate interpretations with their peers. The librarians are scholars themselves, trained in the classification systems that organize this vast ocean of knowledge into manageable categories. The catalogue alone fills dozens of scrolls, each entry noting the title, author, number of chapters, and condition of the work. Among the treasures of this library are the works of Sima Qian, the Grand Historian, whose Records of the Grand Historian remains one of the greatest works of historical writing ever produced in any civilization. Sima Qian set himself a task of staggering ambition to record the entire history of the Chinese world from the legendary Yellow Emperor to his own time, a span of over 2,000 years. The result is a work of 130 chapters, covering political history, chronological tables, treatises on topics from economics to astronomy, and, most famously, a series of biographies that bring the figures of the past alive with novelistic vividness. Sima Qian's own life was marked by both triumph and tragedy. When he spoke in defense of a general who had surrendered to the Xiongnu, arguing that the man's situation had been impossible rather than his courage lacking, Emperor Wu was furious. Sima Qian was given a choice: death or castration. He chose castration because his history was not yet finished, because his father's dying wish had been that he complete the great work, because he believed that the record he was creating would outlast his personal humiliation. And he was right. The records of the grand historian has been read continuously for over 2,000 years. Sima Qian's name is immortal. The shame he suffered has been transformed by time into a testament to the power of dedication to one's life's work. The intellectual achievements of the Han extend far beyond history and literature. In medicine, the foundational texts of Chinese medical practice were compiled during this period: the Huangdi Neijing, the Yellow Emperor's classic of internal medicine, which laid out the theoretical framework of qi, yin and yang, and the meridian system that still guides traditional Chinese medicine today. Han physicians practiced acupuncture, herbal medicine, and diagnostic techniques based on careful observation of the pulse, the tongue, the complexion, and the patient's overall presentation. They understood the importance of diet, exercise, and emotional balance in maintaining health. A Han physician visits a patient in a wealthy household. He arrives with his case of instruments, slender bronze needles for acupuncture, a set of moxa sticks for heat treatment, and a collection of dried herbs in silk pouches, each labeled with its name and properties. He takes the patient's pulse, not at one point, as Western physicians would later do, but at multiple positions on both wrists, each position corresponding to a different organ system. He notes the quality of the pulse: is it slippery or rough, rapid or slow, strong or weak? Each quality tells him something about the patient's condition, about the flow of qi through the body, about where blockages or deficiencies might lie. His diagnosis made, he prescribes a formula of herbs, perhaps ginseng for vitality, angelica root for blood circulation, licorice to harmonize the other ingredients. The herbs will be boiled into a decoction, the bitter liquid drunk twice daily until the balance is restored. He also places acupuncture needles at specific points along the patient's meridians, invisible channels of energy that connect the organs to the surface of the body. The needles are fine as hairs, and their insertion is nearly painless. The patient feels only a subtle warmth spreading from each needle point, a gentle unlocking of tension that brings ease and drowsiness. In mathematics, the 9 chapters on the mathematical art, compiled in its final form during the Han, presented solutions to practical problems in surveying, taxation, engineering, and commerce. It included methods for calculating areas and volumes, solving systems of linear equations, and extracting square and cube roots. The level of mathematical sophistication was remarkable. Many of the techniques described would not appear in European mathematics for another 1,000 years. The text is organized around real-world problems: how to calculate the tax on an irregularly shaped field, how to determine the volume of grain in a cylindrical granary, how to proportion the labor required for digging a canal of specific dimensions. And there is still more to say of Han technology, for we have not yet spoken of iron. The Han dynasty's mastery of iron production was perhaps its most practically significant technological achievement. While other civilizations still relied on bronze or wrought iron for their tools and weapons, the Han had developed blast furnaces capable of producing cast iron at temperatures exceeding 1,000 degrees. The bellows that drove these furnaces were enormous, powered by water wheels that turned continuously, day and night, forcing air into the smelting chambers with a steady roar. The iron that poured from these furnaces could be cast into molds of any shape: plowshares, cooking pots, axe heads, weapons, bridge components, even decorative sculptures. The state maintained iron monopolies, government-run foundries that produced standardized tools and distributed them across the empire at controlled prices. This ensured that even poor farmers had access to iron tools, which dramatically increased agricultural productivity. An iron plowshare cuts deeper and holds its edge longer than bronze. An iron axe fells trees faster. Iron nails hold timber together more securely than wooden pegs. The cumulative effect of cheap, abundant iron tools on the Han economy was enormous. It was the industrial revolution of its age, a transformation in productive capacity that made everything else possible. Consider the salt mines of Sichuan, another marvel of Han engineering. Deep beneath the earth, deposits of brine could be reached by drilling boreholes hundreds of meters deep using bamboo drilling rigs. The drill bits were iron, attached to bamboo pipes that could be extended section by section as the hole deepened. The brine was drawn up through bamboo pipes and evaporated in iron pans heated by natural gas, yes, natural gas, captured from the same boreholes and channeled through more bamboo pipes to the evaporation furnaces. This was industrial chemistry on an impressive scale, practiced 2,000 years ago with an ingenuity that still commands admiration. The night draws on. Let us visit one more scene from the Han world before we allow the darkness to deepen toward sleep. Let us go to the workshop of a lacquerware artisan in the southern city of Chengdu, one of the great centers of luxury craft production during the Han period. The workshop is warm and close, lit by oil lamps whose steady flames cast no flicker on the work surfaces. The artisan sits before a wooden form, a wine cup, perhaps, or a small cosmetic box, applying yet another coat of lacquer with a flat brush of human hair. Lacquer is the sap of the lacquer tree, toxic when wet but extraordinarily durable when cured. Each coat must dry for days in a humid atmosphere before the next can be applied, and a fine piece may require 20, 30, even 50 coats before it achieves the depth and luminosity that marks a masterwork. The artisan's hands are steady from decades of practice. He works in near silence, his breathing slow and even, his focus absolute. The lacquer gleams in the lamplight, black as midnight, or red as cinnabar, or occasionally decorated with paintings so fine that they seem to have been drawn with a single hair. Birds and clouds, dragons and phoenixes, scenes of daily life and mythological narrative, all rendered in lines of gold and silver against the dark ground. These objects will travel the empire and beyond. Han lacquerware has been found in tombs from Korea to Afghanistan, evidence of a trade network that spanned the known world. Nearby, In another workshop, a silk weaver works at her loom. The loom is a marvel of engineering, a draw loom capable of producing complex figured fabrics with patterns of clouds, animals, geometric designs, and even Chinese characters woven directly into the cloth. The weaver's hands move with practiced rhythm, throwing the shuttle, pressing the treadles, adjusting the pattern cords that control which warp threads are raised and which lowered. The fabric growing beneath her hands is destined for the Silk Road. It will be sold to a merchant who will carry it westward, through the deserts and over the mountains, until it reaches the wardrobes of Roman senators and Parthian nobles who will never know the name of the woman who wove it. The silk is extraordinary to touch, lighter than water, smoother than polished jade, with a sheen that shifts in the light like the surface of a calm lake. The Chinese guarded the secret of silk production jealously for centuries, the knowledge that this miraculous fabric came from the cocoon of a small caterpillar, spun in a continuous thread that could be unwound and twisted into yarn. Any attempt to smuggle silkworms or mulberry seeds out of China was punishable by death. For the Western world, silk remained a mystery. Some believed it was combed from the leaves of trees, others that it was scraped from the surface of certain stones. The truth, when it was finally discovered, seemed no less magical. The hours pass. The lamps burn lower. Outside the workshops, the city of Chengdu grows quiet, only the occasional bark of a dog, the cry of a night watchman calling the hour, the rustle of bamboo in a courtyard garden stirred by the breeze. The artisan sets down his brush at last, covers his work with a damp cloth, and stretches his fingers. Tomorrow he will apply another coat, and the day after that another, and so on through the weeks until the piece is complete. There is no rushing this process. The lacquer demands patience, demands surrender to its own timeline. And in this demand, perhaps, there is a lesson that the finest things in life cannot be hurried, that beauty emerges not from speed but from steady, devoted attention over time. The Han Dynasty understood this truth. Its 4 centuries of existence were not a single dramatic arc but a slow accumulation of knowledge, of culture, of institutional wisdom, of practical improvements to the daily life of millions. Each generation built upon the work of those before, adding their own layer of lacquer, their own contribution to the growing depth and richness of the civilization. Farmers improved their techniques. Scholars refined their philosophies. Artisans perfected their crafts. Administrators developed more effective systems of governance. And over time, this patient accumulation produced something extraordinary, a civilization of remarkable sophistication, creativity, and resilience. Let us linger now in the world of everyday ritual and domestic life, for it is in these small, repeated acts that a civilization reveals its deepest values. The Han household was organized around principles of filial piety and reciprocal obligation that gave every member a defined role and a sense of belonging. The patriarch presided over the family's affairs, but his authority was tempered by duty. He owed protection and provision to every member of the household, from his aged parents to the youngest servant. The matriarch managed the domestic economy with quiet competence, overseeing food preparation, textile production, the education of daughters, and the elaborate rituals of hospitality that cemented social bonds. A Han household of middling prosperity might include 3 generations living under one roof: grandparents, parents, children, and perhaps an unmarried uncle or widowed aunt. The house itself was built around a courtyard, a private outdoor space enclosed by the wings of the building, open to the sky above. The courtyard was the heart of domestic life, a place for cooking in good weather, for children's play, for drying grain and airing quilts, for sitting in the evening cool and watching the swallows nest beneath the eaves. A well-maintained courtyard was a source of pride, swept clean each morning, its potted plants watered, its threshold freshly whitewashed. The rhythms of the household followed the rhythms of the day and the season. Dawn brought the first stirring, the grandmother rising earliest to light the kitchen fire, heating water for morning gruel. The father would check the weather, consult the calendar hung by the door, a printed sheet showing the lucky and unlucky days for various activities, and plan the day's work accordingly. The children would be roused, washed, fed, and either sent to their studies or assigned their household tasks. The mother would begin the day's weaving or sewing, her loom set up in the brightest corner of the main room, a shuttle flying back and forth with a rhythm as steady as breathing. Festivals punctuated the year with color and celebration. The new year was the greatest, a time when all debts were settled, all grudges forgiven, when families gathered from distances to share a meal and honor their ancestors. The house would be cleaned from top to bottom in the days before, every surface scrubbed, every cobweb swept away, symbolizing the clearing away of the old year's misfortunes. Red paper good luck characters were pasted on the doors. Firecrackers, an early form, made from dried bamboo thrown into the fire to produce explosive cracks, were set off to drive away evil spirits. The feast itself went on for days, with dishes prepared in quantities meant to ensure abundance in the year to come. The Qingming festival in spring was a time for visiting the ancestral graves, clearing away weeds, offering food and wine to the spirits of the departed, burning paper replicas of useful objects that the dead might need in the afterlife. Families would picnic beside the graves, telling stories about the ancestors, maintaining the connection between the living and the dead that was central to Han religious thought. The boundary between this world and the next was thin in the Han imagination. The dead were not gone but merely in another place, still capable of influencing the fortunes of their descendants, still deserving of respect and remembrance. The Mid-Autumn Festival came in the 8th lunar month, when the harvest moon hung enormous and golden above the rooftops. Families gathered outdoors to admire the moon, eating round mooncakes filled with sweetened bin paste or lotus seed, telling the legend of Chang'e, the goddess who drank the elixir of immortality and floated up to live forever on the moon, accompanied only by her jade rabbit. Children stayed up late on this night, running through the streets with lanterns shaped like rabbits and fish, their excited voices carrying through the warm autumn air. Beyond the festivals, the spiritual life of Han China was a rich blend of ancestral worship, Confucian ritual, Daoist philosophy, and folk religion. Every household maintained a shrine to its ancestors, a small altar where incense was burned daily and offerings of food and drink were made at regular intervals. The ancestors were consulted before major decisions, marriages, business ventures, journeys, through divination methods that ranged from reading cracks in heated tortoise shells to interpreting the patterns of thrown coins. The relationship with the ancestors was not one of fear but of ongoing family connection. They were grandparents and great-grandparents, known by name and story, their advice sought as naturally as one might ask a living elder. Taoism offered a different dimension of spiritual life, a philosophy of harmony with the natural world, of following the Tao, the way, the underlying pattern of reality. Taoist priests performed rituals for health and longevity, prepared elixirs and talismans, and practiced meditation techniques aimed at cultivating the vital energy within the body. For many Han Chinese, Confucianism and Taoism were not competing belief systems but complementary aspects of a complete life, Confucianism governing one's social and political duties, Taoism nourishing one's inner life and connection to nature. And then there was Buddhism, arriving along the Silk Road during the Eastern Han period, a new philosophy from India that offered something neither Confucianism nor Taoism provided, a comprehensive explanation of suffering and a path to its transcendence. Buddhism's arrival in China is one of history's great cultural encounters, the meeting of two ancient and sophisticated civilizations, each forced to accommodate the ideas of the other. The process of translation alone was heroic. Buddhist concepts that had no Chinese equivalent had to be rendered into a language built on entirely different philosophical foundations. The result was a uniquely Chinese form of Buddhism that would flourish for centuries. But tonight, in this quiet farmhouse in the Han countryside, such grand philosophical questions seem very far away. The family spirituality is simpler, more immediate, a daily offering of incense at the ancestor shrine, a prayer for rain when the fields are dry, a quiet confidence that the rhythms of nature are fundamentally benevolent if one lives in harmony with them. The grandmother tells the children stories from the old mythology, tales of the Jade Emperor and the Dragon Kings, of immortals who ride on clouds and scholars who become gods after death. The stories blend seamlessly with the everyday world. The same mountains that the children see from their doorstep are home to immortals and spirits. The same river that waters their fields is ruled by a dragon who must be appeased with festivals and offerings. Let us return now to the countryside, for the final stretches of our journey through the Han world. The season has turned, it is autumn now, and the harvest is underway across the great plains of northern China. The rice paddies have been drained, and the golden stalks stand ready for cutting. In the wheat fields further north, the grain has already been gathered and the threshing floors are busy, the rhythmic beat of flails against the dried sheaves creating a percussion that carries for miles across the flat landscape. A family works together in their field, cutting rice with curved sickles, bundling the stalks and carrying them to the threshing floor on their backs. The work is hard, but there is satisfaction in it. The granary will be full this year, the tax will be paid easily, and there will be surplus to sell at the market town. The children chase each other between the stubble rows, their laughter rising into the autumn air, while the grandmother sits in the shade of a persimmon tree, mending a basket and keeping one eye on the youngest child. The persimmon tree is heavy with fruit, great orange globes hanging among the yellowing leaves like lanterns lit from within. Later, after the rice is in, the family will harvest the persimmons too, some to eat fresh, some to dry in the thin autumn sunshine into chewy, sugar-dusted sweets that will brighten the dark months of winter. The grandmother remembers doing this same work as a child, and her grandmother before her. The continuity is comforting, the sense that despite all the changes in the world beyond this field, some things remain constant. The earth gives its fruit in its season. The family gathers it together. The cycle turns. As the sun descends toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose, the family gathers their tools and walks home along the path between the fields. The father carries the youngest child on his shoulders, and the child points at the first stars appearing in the eastern sky. The mother walks beside them, her hands pleasantly tired from the day's work, her mind already turning to the evening meal, the fresh rice they threshed today, steamed with dried mushrooms and a handful of green vegetables from the garden. The older children run ahead, racing each other to the farmhouse gate, their voices growing smaller in the distance. The farmhouse appears before them, its walls of rammed earth warm in the last light, its roof of grey tile solid against the sky, smoke already rising from the kitchen chimney where a neighbor has begun heating water for tea. The courtyard is swept clean, the chickens have been shut in their coop, and the pig grunts contentedly from its pen beside the compost heap. Everything is in its place. Everything speaks of order and sufficiency, of a life lived within the rhythms of the natural world, supported by the stability of a well-governed empire. This is the achievement of the Han Dynasty that is perhaps least celebrated but most important, the creation of conditions in which ordinary people could live ordinary lives with a reasonable expectation of peace and prosperity. Not always, of course, there were wars, famines, floods, plagues, rebellions. No era of history is free from suffering. But for much of its centuries, the Han state maintained a level of order and infrastructure that allowed tens of millions of people to farm, trade, study, create, and raise their families in relative security. And that, perhaps, is the truest measure of a golden age. The evening meal is simple and satisfying: steamed rice, a dish of braised tofu with preserved vegetables, a soup of egg drop and greens, and tea brewed strong and hot. The family eats together around a low table, the oil lamp casting a warm circle of light that holds them together against the growing darkness outside. The grandmother tells a story, an old tale about a jade rabbit who lives on the moon, pounding the elixir of immortality with a mortar and pestle. The youngest child listens with wide eyes, imagining the rabbit up there in the pale disk that is just now rising above the trees. After dinner, the father mends a tool handle by the light of the lamp while the mother prepares the bedding, quilts of padded cotton laid over the heated kang, their surfaces worn soft by years of use. The children are already drowsy, their eyes heavy from the long day of work and play and autumn air. One by one they settle onto the warm platform, pulling the quilts up to their chins, their breathing slowing as the heat seeps into their tired muscles. The grandmother hums a lullaby, barely audible, more vibration than melody, and within minutes the children are asleep. The night comes on fully now. The parents sit for a moment longer in the courtyard, drinking a last cup of hot water and watching the stars. The Milky Way stretches overhead, the same river of light that the astronomers study in their towers, the same sky that merchants see from the back of their camels on the Silk Road, the same stars that shine through the palace windows onto the sleeping emperor. One sky, one civilization, one moment in the long sweep of history. The Han Dynasty is drawing toward its close, though the people living through these years do not know it yet. The later Eastern Han period will see the slow erosion of central authority, the rise of powerful landowners, the growing influence of eunuch factions and consort families at court. Eventually, in 220 CE, the last Han emperor will abdicate, and China will fracture into the Three Kingdoms, an era of romance and warfare that will generate its own rich body of legend and literature. But that ending, like all endings, is also a beginning. The civilization that the Han built, its institutions, its philosophies, its technologies, its artistic traditions, will endure long after the dynasty itself has passed. The examination system will continue for 17 more centuries. The Confucian values will shape Chinese society into the modern era. The Silk Road will carry trade and culture between East and West for 1,000 years more. And the Chinese people will continue to call themselves the Han, carrying the name of this golden age forward through all the dynasties and upheavals that follow. The farmer sleeps now, his breathing slow and deep, his body resting after the day's honest labor. Beside him, his wife sleeps too, and their children, and their neighbors in the farmhouses nearby. Across the empire, in cities and villages, in mountain monasteries and river ports, in frontier garrisons and coastal fishing towns, millions of people are settling into sleep, wrapped in quilts of padded cotton, warmed by heated kangs, lulled by the sounds of wind and water and the deep quiet of the Chinese night. In Chang'an or Luoyang, depending on the era, the palace is dark except for the night watch lanterns and the dim glow from the emperor's private study, where perhaps one last report is being read before the Son of Heaven himself surrenders to sleep. In the marketplace, a stray cat picks its way between the empty stalls, and the night watchman strikes his wooden clapper twice, the second watch of the night. In the library, the scrolls lie in their labeled boxes, their knowledge patiently waiting for the morning and the scholars who will unroll them again with careful hands. In the observatory, the astronomer has finally laid down his sighting tube. His night's observations are recorded, the data added to the great chain of measurements that stretches back decades and forward into the future. He wraps his cloak more tightly around his shoulders against the pre-dawn chill and descends the tower stairs slowly, his eyes adjusting from the darkness of the sky to the darkness of the stairwell. His bed awaits him, and a few hours of sleep before the day's other duties begin. Even astronomers must rest. And on the Silk Road, somewhere in the vast spaces between civilizations, a caravan has made camp for the night. The camels kneel in a circle, their loads removed, their strange faces placid in the firelight. The merchants sit around their small fire, drinking tea and speaking in low voices about the road ahead, the passes to cross, the towns to reach, the goods to trade. Above them, the same stars that shine over China shine over the whole length of the road, over Persia and India, over the mountains and deserts, over all the lands that the Han Dynasty brought into contact with each other through the simple, powerful act of reaching outward. The caravan guard stirs the coals once more, and the embers flare briefly before settling back into their quiet glow. In the distance, a fox barks, a sharp sound that cuts the silence and then is absorbed by it, leaving the night more profound than before. The sand holds the heat of the day like a memory, releasing it slowly through the hours of darkness, and the air above grows cool and clear and still. Think of all the caravans that have passed this way, thousands upon thousands over the centuries of Han rule. Think of all the goods that have flowed east and west along this ribbon of trade, the silk and spices, the gold and glass, the ideas and stories and songs. Think of all the connections made, all the misunderstandings bridged, all the curiosity satisfied and new curiosity kindled. The Silk Road is not merely a trade route, it is an act of imagination, a refusal to accept that the world ends at the border, a determination to know what lies beyond the horizon. And this determination, this outward-looking curiosity, is perhaps the Han Dynasty's greatest gift to the future, the understanding that civilization is not a fortress to be defended but a conversation to be continued, reaching ever outward, embracing ever more of the world's richness and variety. The fire burns low. The merchants roll themselves in their felt blankets and lie back on the sand, still warm from the day's sun. The caravan guard takes the first watch, sitting with his back against a saddle, his eyes scanning the darkness beyond the firelight's reach. Nothing moves out there, only the wind, only the sand, only the vast breathing silence of the desert night. The guard counts the stars to keep himself awake, naming the constellations as his father taught him. The dragon, the vermilion bird, the white tiger, the dark warrior, the four guardians of the four directions, watching over travelers and sleepers alike. Somewhere in a southern province, a river boat drifts on the current, carrying rice and tea downstream toward the great Yangtze. The boatman dozes at his tiller, his straw hat pulled low over his eyes, trusting the current to carry him true. The river is wide here, and slow, its surface reflecting the stars with only the gentlest distortion. Bamboo groves line the banks, their leaves rustling in whispers that sound almost like words in a language just beyond understanding. A heron stands in the shallows, motionless as a sculpture, waiting for the silver flash of a fish. The boat slides past without disturbing it. In a mountain monastery far from any city, a deist priest sits in meditation. His breathing has slowed to almost nothing, each breath a full minute's journey in and out, his consciousness expanded to include the sounds of the night around him. The drip of water from a spring. The creak of ancient pines in the wind. The far-off call of an owl. He is practicing the art of emptiness, of letting go of thought, of releasing the grip of desire and worry, of allowing the mind to become as vast and still and clear as the sky itself. This practice will continue through the night and into the morning, a vigil older than any dynasty, a technology of the spirit refined over uncounted generations. In a barracks on the northern frontier, soldiers sleep in rows on their wooden cots, their armor hung on pegs above their heads, their weapons within arm's reach. They dream of home, of wives and children, of fields and festivals, of the warm south where winter is mild and the food has flavor. Tomorrow they will patrol the wall, watching for the dust clouds that signal a nomad raiding party. But tonight they are at peace, their bodies heavy with the exhaustion of training, their minds surrendered to whatever dreams the night provides. In a harbor on the southeastern coast, fishing boats bob gently at their moorings. The tide is turning, and by dawn the fishermen will be awake, pushing off into the grey pre-light to cast their nets in the rich waters offshore. The salt smell of the sea mingles with the smoke of cooking fires from the village above the harbor, and the sound of waves on the breakwater is a lullaby as old as the ocean itself, endless, rhythmic, hypnotic in its constancy. All of China sleeps. All of the Han world rests beneath the same turning sky. From the desert frontier to the tropical coast, from the mountain monasteries to the river plains, from the imperial palace to the humblest farmer's cottage, the night holds them all in its vast embrace. 400 years of history. 60 million people in a single empire. Countless inventions and poems and paintings and meals and conversations and dreams, all flowing together like the tributaries of a great river, all contributing to the current that carries a civilization forward through time. Let the stars watch over you now, as they watched over the Han world. Let the quiet of the ancient night settle around you like a silk quilt, soft, light, warm. The golden age is always somewhere in time, a place we can visit in the mind when the present feels heavy. Tonight, let it be the Han Dynasty, let it be the lantern-lit streets of Chang'an, the misty rice paddies of the south, the star-filled skies of the desert road. Let the patient wisdom of 4 centuries of civilization be your companion into sleep. The breath slows. The mind softens. The images drift and dissolve, a crescent moon over a palace roof, silk rippling in a merchant's hands, the sound of a zither fading into silence, plum blossoms falling on wet stones, the scratch of a brush on paper, the slow turn of a water wheel, the warmth of a kang on a winter night. The Han Dynasty sleeps, and we sleep with it, carried into the dark on the same slow current that carries all things, all eras, all golden ages, into the peaceful depths of rest. Sleep well. The morning will come, as it always comes, with light and birdsong and the beginning of new days. But for now, there is only this, the quiet, the dark, the stars, and the long gentle dream of ancient China, holding you softly through the night.